Welcome back to Hospice Talk with RC Hospice. I'm Tom Rupp. I'm the chaplain here at RC. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about discussing death with a child. In our work, we tend to minister to and work with adults in hospice care, in bereavement care with the family. And we get used to working with adults, but every once in a while, we have to help and minister to a child. And of course, as you know, it's a little different. Two things especially come to mind when I think about this. One of them is the jargon we use. We get used to using our jargon. You know, the various phrases, clinical type phrases we will use in talking about bereavement and or death. So you have to be aware of that, first of all, in talking to a child. Of course, a child's not going to understand the jargon. And the second thing also is to understand and be aware of not only the jargon, but also just the entire frame of reality, of reference for a child. Of course, it's going to be different. I have a couple of experiences, if you don't mind me sharing, that will illustrate this. The first one goes back some years when I was younger, and I was a pastor of a church back on the East Coast, and we had a family there in our church, an older gentleman and a younger wife, and their son. He was, I imagine, in his 60s, if I can recall, and he had heart trouble, and his son was 7 years old. And over the course of things, this gentleman had a heart attack one night after his son had gone to bed, and the rescue squad came and got him, took him to the hospital, and during the night, he died. Well, his wife called me as their pastor and asked me to do a task that I'd never been trained to do in that sense, and I'd never done before, practically, and that is to tell her little boy that his daddy had died overnight. I still feel the heaviness even now talking about it. 30 years, 40 years almost ago. So I came to the house that morning and went to the bedroom of the little boy, and he's sitting on the bed because Mom had prepared him. Pastor Tom would like to tell you something. And I was young, and I did not fully understand, I think at that time, exactly what I was doing. And so I started to talk to this little boy about life and how the life isn't forever, and heaven is our final home, and we're Christians and we live life on earth, and then one day we go home. And I was working my way to him and his family, and finally I worked my way to the fact that and your dad last night went home, and his eyes perked up, and he looked at me and says, "My daddy's home?" And as he said that, and I realized I didn't blow it, but boy, I dug myself into a huge hole, and I had to quickly get out. And so without just flat telling him to his face, your daddy's died, but I had to work my way over. Oh no, I'm sorry, he's not coming to this home. He went to heaven last night. But even then, the way I termed it, it was an initial shock. It again made me think of how aware we need to be on the words we use, the exact words we choose, especially when talking to children about death. I'm not saying you have to put the cold water in their face about it, but by the same token, you can mealy mouth your way around it to the point where you're not really saying anything. I'm not going to give you code words to say. You have to come up with those. The words to say, the proper frames of reference to use that will help a child understand that their loved one is no longer on this earth with them. I recently had a more positive experience, for me at least, where again one of our patients died, and their daughter called me with her daughter on the phone. This would be the granddaughter of the patient, probably about 10 or 11 years old, attending a Catholic school, a religious school, but she wanted me to listen to what her daughter said, the patient's granddaughter, about Grandpa's death, and just affirm and not necessarily correct, but make sure she had a good grasp, which she did in my view, of what had just happened. So it was on the phone because they were into a different state, and I listened and I talked, more listened than talked, and the young little girl gave her little view, and when needed I affirmed and agreed and said, that's very good, thank you, yes. And being that they were Christian, God's helping you, I see He's really spoken to you, and that's good. And tried to speak to her in language that she understood. It's almost like trying to think like a little child with an adult brain and an adult body. And so I was attempting to think like a little child. That conversation was very positive, very affirming. It was very helpful to that little girl, and I was glad to be a part of that process. That made me feel good. These are the kind of situations we find ourselves in. Not all of our patients have children or grandchildren that young that need to be helped or dealt with in that way. But every once in a while we do get this. And when it happens, we need to be ready with the proper words and the proper frame of reference, the proper angle, so that people know that their loved one who has been with them no longer is. I have many stories I could tell, I guess, but I'm going to leave it at that for now. And maybe if you have other questions or would like to contact us further, I would encourage you to feel free to do so here at RC Hospice, where our phone number is 916-858-1440. Love to hear from you. Thank you for listening.